Alright, so I had a request to show how I made the legs for my last um, multiplayer FPS update. So I guess this is kind of the third video in the FPS kit tutorial series. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to start off by dragging in our player prefab. So I'm assuming you already have your scene set up with the in-game prefab and a spawn point and a basic area to run around with. Um, so we're going to navigate to the prefabs folder, the player folder, third person models, and you can either make a new model or just choose one that you already have. I made this one specifically for the tutorial, so I'm going to drag it into the scene here. So you're going to start with just the basic player model. You have all the scripts and whatnot on it. And what's in the original kit is the shadows only version of the model, which means that when you actually go into the game and are playing, all you see are your like hands. You don't see the underside. So what we're going to be changing is basically cutting this player model in half and rendering in the legs along with the hands separate from the body. So we're going to have to do a little bit of script editing to make this work, and also some texture editing, but it's easy to do if you have Photoshop or any other texture or picture editor really, um, which I can show you a free version of one of those online. So first what we're going to do is just make sure you have your base model set up with everything on it that you need, and make sure you have the model that you want rigged and it has an animator and stuff on it and all the scripts that go along with it. So what we're going to start off doing is we're going to duplicate whatever your model is. So you have the base player object here. You're going to hit that drop down, and there's going to be an object under it that has all your character objects assigned to it, like the bones, the mesh objects for the body. So you're going to want to duplicate that entire object and make a separate one. Let's call this one legs. So what you're going to want to do with this object is keep it exactly the same as the previous object. And all we're going to do is we're going to move it back just a little bit. It needs to be under our, or exactly aligned with our player to start. I'm just going to reset it. So we have it kind of in the basic, same alignment as the other model, but it's just a duplicate. What we're going to do is when you spawn in the game, the camera starts out, the first person camera is about right here behind the player. So the legs actually need to be around right under or right behind the player here. So we're going to need to move the duplicate of the player just slightly behind it, but make sure it's lined up just as this one is if you want to get it, right in the center of your screen. Let's just move those legs up a little bit. And I'm actually going to scale it up a bit because it looks better or more proportional in the first person view. Alright, so once we have that, what we're going to want to do is delete the kit third person modern IK relay on it. You don't need that. All we need is the animator, because this player model isn't going to do anything except animate the leg part. That's all we need. Alright. So let's make sure there's nothing else on any of our bone objects. We can remove the rigid body and box collider components on all of the joints. I'm just cycling through all my different bones right now. I'm just going to quick select all the ones that have character joints on them that we need to get rid of. Okay, and once you're here, you just remove everything assigned to it. This is just good to clean up the model, so it's just the model, and that's it. All right, so if you try to play the game at this point, it's not going to animate this object in the background, this duplicate of the player model, because it only animates the one that is the primary player object, so this one. So what we need to do is add another line of code in the script for every animation call for this player object, which actually isn't that hard. I'll show you in a second. So you see here in my, if you look up at the base player model object, there's a kit third person modern player model script on it. And this script has the animator object for the primary player model object. And what we're going to want to do is assign another animator for the other player model object, the legs here, so that both of them are animated at the same time. And how we're going to do that is just double click on this script icon, and it'll pull up whatever scripting IDE you're using. And we're going to add a few lines of code. So I've already added in kit third person player model, I've added another line of code for our second animator for our legs, and I've called it legs anim. So what we're going to do is we're going to be replacing every or not replacing, we're going to be duplicating every line that has the anim object on it, and we're going to be putting legs anim in there instead. I'm just going to check, yeah, and this is the only script where you're going to add a line of code for the pair of legs that you need to use. So once you're done doing that on the kit third person player model.cs script, you're going to want to find the kit third person modern player model script, and this is a different script. So you're going to hop on over to there. This script, all this does is it adds a spot in the editor here for you to assign the legs to. And what this is going to be doing, this script, the modern player model, it's going to be actually making the legs able to move. So another thing you're going to want to add is something to hide the different mesh renderers when you actually, go into the game and you want to use third person, or if you don't want other players in the lobby to see your legs, like hovering behind your player model. We're going to need to add this line of code to the modern player model script to get rid of that. And this just makes an array of objects, skin mesh renderers that we can hide. All right. I've already added the lines of code for my legs anim or whatever, but what you're going to want to do is scroll down to the line that says, if get animation, it's line 201, 199, 201. You're going to start finding where the anim object starts getting assigned stuff to do, and that's where we're going to start duplicating. So what I did for each of these is I just copied the line, pasted it, and then changed the name. And then what I did to make it go faster is I just would copy this, paste it, change the name, copy, paste, change the name. And I did that for every iteration where I found anim.play, whenever something is happening to the anim, which is the primary animator, I would just do the same thing for our new animator legs. And you can see that using Control F is a good way to find where, the spots are that you need to copy and paste and change the name to whatever you need, whatever you assigned it to. I'm just going to scroll down here and show you everywhere that I've changed it. It would take me a little bit longer to change all that, but this goes faster. I've already done it for you. Now, there's certain parts of it where it's a block of code like an if statement, and what I did with this is the same thing. I just copy it, paste it, change the name, and then change the name in here as well. And it would do the same animation as the primary animator is doing. So everywhere you find an anim, you want to copy that block of code or that line of code and change it. So here we have a bigger block. And what I did is I just copied the entire section, including the else statement, because it has more lines of code containing anim. Pasted it, changed all of it. Did the same thing here, same thing here. Here's another line, same thing. So everywhere you find an anim line of code, you need to copy that. Right here, I just copied this whole section. Did the same thing here. So, I did that all the way down this line of code, or this this file. And the good thing is this is the only file that you have to do that for. You don't have to do that for any other files of code. And then make sure that you, of course, you added the object for the inspector. So what this is going to do is it's going to create an object or an animator called legs anim, where you can assign your animator for the legs, and it's going to be doing all the same animations and actions as this animator, which is the primary animator. So once you did that, just save your code and make sure there's no errors with it. So if you played the game right now, what would happen is that these two models would do the exact same animation right behind each other. But what we want is we want this model to be doing that, but just half of it. So we're going to do some texture editing real quick. So if you have Photoshop, you're just going to want to find the mesh that, renders your body or the body of the player. And what you're going to want to do is basically just find that and find the texture that goes along with it. And you're going to want to edit that. So the texture for my body mesh, I'm just going to double click on it, open Photoshop or whatever text editor you want, or not text editor, picture editor that you want. So I've already opened mine here. All right. So this is the texture that I edited for my previous legs, and you'll see that half of it is basically gone. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing. So the basic idea for editing the texture of your body mesh is to find the parts of it that look like the upper body, which I could tell from my texture was this part. And then you want to find the parts of it that are, that might be strewn about the picture here, like the gloves are down here, more gloves up there, right here. So the texture map, you just want to find the different parts of it that are, that you think are the upper body, and you're just going to want to basically delete those and leave the background transparent. Now, if you don't have a picture editor like Photoshop, you can go to this website, pixlr.com/editor, and it's just an online photo editor. It's almost exactly like Photoshop. My Flash isn't wanting it to run. Here we go. Oh, come on. All right, there we go. So it's basically Photoshop. It has all the same tools. You got your lasso tools and your cut tools and whatnot. So everything I do in Photoshop you can do in this online text editor or photo editor. So what we're going to want to do is I'm just going to cut that, put that in a new file, make sure it's transparent. Just delete that so I don't mess it up. So now we have a new, just clean slate texture file with a transparent background. And I'm going to start deleting the upper body portions of our texture. Just using this as a reference since I know, the general area. Seems like we go a bit further. And then I have some gloves here that I just need to cut out. Okay. So at this point we have the upper body portion of this texture cut out, and all that's left is the legs. So that's exactly what we want. We're going to save it as whatever file type we need. I'm going to call this legs trans for legs transparent. I'm going to save that as interlaced so that it keeps the transparency. Now another way you could do this is by editing the model itself and cutting the model in half, but that requires a little bit more knowledge. This is easier in my opinion. All right, let's go back into our editor. So we're now going to have a texture with the top half of the body cut out, which is exactly what we want. And I'm going to copy the material that's assigned to the body mesh, this one. Duplicate it and just rename it to something like legs transparent material. So now we have a material that we can assign to this object. And we can change the different qualities of it. So I'm going to change the texture to the one that we just made, which is legs trans. And you'll see that we now have like a white, like no color portion top half of this dude's body. We can go ahead and hide the head. We don't need that. We also don't need those bags. We're just looking for the legs part. So you'll notice that the top half of the body is just completely white. That's what we want. So I'm using HDRP for this project, so the material options are going to be a little bit different, but it's the same idea. So in the standard Unity, all that you'll be changing is the albedo or the base texture, which is what we just changed this to. So in the standard shader, there's a drop down for opaque and there's a drop down for transparent, but you're going to want to keep it on opaque and enable alpha cutoff. Now, I don't know if the standard Unity texture allows alpha cutoff with opaque. I think it does. But the basic idea is just to either use the standard Unity standard Unity material with alpha cutoff, or use a legacy transparent cutout shader. It'll do the same thing. But you're just going to want to have alpha cutoff enabled. And what this is going to do is it's going to hide the top portion of the body. It's going to hide whatever part of that texture is transparent, and that's exactly what we want. Now you'll notice that the shadow, half the shadow is gone, but that's okay. What we're going to do to fix that is we're actually just going to change this object, the body object that's now legs, we're going to change that to shadows only. Or no, we're not going to change that to shadows only, I'm sorry. We're going to change cast shadows to off for that. We don't want shadows for the legs. You just want the legs. And for the armor here, you're going to want to change that to shadows off as well. Alright, so what we're going to want is to get the full shadow matching with the feet and legs and all, is you're going to want to, under the legs, separate, player model object, we're going to want to duplicate the body mesh object again. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us a copy of the body mesh, which is now half legs. But what we're going to do is we're going to change it back to the material that it was before. And now you'll notice that if we change cast shadows back to on, we have our shadow. So what we're going to do to fix this is we're just going to change it to shadows only. And now we have our legs with a matching shadow and arms. We can turn the head back on. And these bags. Now we have a matching player model object that is half legs and has a shadow. Now these bags I think they'll cause some issues, I guess, if we're trying to look down at our player model. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assign those the half body texture as well. Okay. So the basic idea is whatever model you're using, you can basically just find the part of it that you want to cut out, and you can do that in your picture editor by just removing that part, changing the body or whatever portion of that mesh to alpha cutoff, then duplicating that mesh. It will have the same animations if you duplicate the mesh. If you duplicate the entire model, the animator will not be controlled, but if it's a mesh under that animator and you duplicate it, it will still be controlled. So that's why we duplicated the body to get the full shadow, but changed it to shadows only. So now we have the matching shadow with the matching legs, half legs. Just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to change the head and bags to shadows only as well. So that's going to give us our half legs. You see there's a little bit of outlier textures up here, and that's because we just didn't do a very good job of cleaning up our half texture all the way, which I can try and fix. Let me save that again. Yeah. Let's see if that fixes it. Oh, there we go. So that fixed our little texture clipping issue. I think there's still a little bit up here, but anyways, basic idea is you have half a model, just the legs, and you have a matching shadow. And with our code that we edited now, these legs will do the same actions as these legs. And the shadow and everything will move along with it, matched and everything. So what we're going to want to do is assign the legs animator to the animator that we just added in the code. And that's going to get us rolling to the point where we'll be able to play the game and see our legs move with our hands and our gun. But there's one extra step if you want this to be playable in your game and other players not be able to see the meshes that you duplicated and have behind your player. So we're going to edit a little bit more code. So up in the third person modern player model script, you're going to want to find where we made that line of code earlier that says skin mesh renderer legs, and it's an array of skin mesh renderers. So down at line 77, I made a few, I think you can do this at whatever line of code you want, but I made two different functions, one called first person legs and one called first person legs hide. And what these each do is it's a for each loop that runs through each skin mesh renderer in that array of leg renderers, and it sets it to enabled. And then this function just hides all of them. It sets it to false. So make sure that you make two functions to hide and show each leg renderer in an array of skin mesh renderers. Okay, I forgot one important area that we need to go over. In the kit third person player model script, not the modern player model script, where I said to make two functions, you have to define those or declare those functions in the third person player model script where we made the public animator legs anim. And I did that just a little bit down here. So scroll down a little bit and you'll see where all the functions get declared. And I declared two functions, one called first person legs and the other called first person legs hide. And this just basically allows us to make two functions in this code that hide the legs and show the legs. So make sure you have these lines of code in the third person player model script and just two functions to hide and show the legs. And then finally, to bring it all together, you want to go to the kit player behavior script and scroll down a little bit and find the first IEnumerator take control wait that has an if photon view.isMine in it. And this is going to basically be setting up our legs for the scene in a multiplayer environment. So right here, there's a line of code that says third person player model first person, and this just sets up the first person view. And right under that, I call third person player model dot first person legs. And what this does is if it's our view, if it's our player, it shows the legs if it's like our first person view. And this means that no one else in the scene will be seeing our duplicate legs behind our player. It'll show them because originally they're going to be hidden behind our player. And then when we die, we're going to want to hide those legs. So find the function called die. There we go. So public void die. If photon view.isMine, I called, this is in the player behavior script, find the die function, line 871. I called third person player model dot first person legs hide. And this hides our legs whenever we die so that they don't just stay there or we don't see them in our own death cam. And that's going to basically clean up the legs for multiplayer. If it's a single player game, you don't have to worry about any of this code stuff other than the animator part. But save all that code, that's all you're going to need. That's basically going to make it so that the legs are able to hide and show depending on if we're in first person view and if the player is either us or not. So finally, just to top it all off, let's make sure that everything is in the right place. The legs have been assigned to the legs anim area and the inspector here. And finally, what we're going to want to do is you're going to see a new drop down called legs or whatever you named it in the third person player model script. And it's going to be at 0 because you just made the array. This is the part of the script up here that we made right here. And we're going to want to define however many objects we want to hide or show based on if we're our player or not. So I'm just going to drag each of my meshes in here. So this is going to include your body mesh, your legs, your half leg mesh, any of the meshes that are attached to your player's body, you're going to want to drag in here, including the duplicate of those legs that we made for the shadow. You're going to want that as well. So drag that in there. So now we have all the meshes in here that we want to hide or show for our character. We have our legs anim assigned to our legs so that it animates the legs. And we have just all the basic objects ready. So just to clean some things up, you might want to go through all your bones in your leg object and make sure that there's no stray colliders, such as this box collider or capsule collider. Make sure that it's all clean. You don't want any colliders messing up your main model. This model with the legs is just supposed to be an animated object. So the model is clean. Might want to see if our arms have any objects on them. Remove those. Okay. And also delete any objects that are, already under those objects from the previous model. Just clean up. Make sure that it is just the model. Okay. I think we're ready to test it and see what happens. So make sure to apply the changes to your prefab. And also make sure that your legs are toggled off before you start. What this is going to do is it's going to allow the code to either hide or show your legs when you spawn into the game, depending on if you're a player or not. And like I said, if it's a single player game, this won't matter, but for the sake of the Mars FPS kit, you're going to want to toggle all of these mesh renderers and your legs object off. You may only have one if your player model is one mesh. So make sure those are toggled off, including the shadows only object here. You're going to want to toggle that off. And then you're going to want to apply that prefab again. All right, let's test it. All right, so you're just going to want to spawn in with whatever loadout you want. Make sure that everything looks as it's supposed to. And you'll see that we now have legs under our weapon model in our hands that move according to our player's movements, and the shadows line up. There's no clipping or weird transparency. They jump, crouch, move accordingly. If you want, you can change the position of the legs to better fit the screen, or however much you want to rotate or move them. but now you have legs in your FPS project or whatever you want. The same concept can be applied to anything, not just the Mars FPS kit. And when you go into third person, you'll see that the legs are not behind us because the code is properly hiding them and showing them. And this will also apply to multiplayer, so other players will not be seeing the legs hovering behind your player. All they will see is, your player running around or shooting. And when you go into first person, you'll see that you have legs, but no one else will see this. The legs move and correspond to your actions. They line up pretty well. And there's no like weird clipping or, issues with it. Alright, well, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to join my Discord or leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.